Hey, hi all. So in this today's session, we'll see what is AngularJS controllers. In the earlier sessions, we have seen different topics as part of AngularJS, directives, expressions, and using of model and bind, and defining the ng init global variables, and then using it as part of extending HTML. Now we'll see what is controllers. So when it comes to controllers in AngularJS, this is the main area where AngularJS relies on to move one control to another control for data manipulations, data transfer. So AngularJS application mainly depends on these controllers to control the flow of data inside of application. A controller is defined using ng controller, and that is one more directive. So using that directive, so we are going to define AngularJS directives. So when it comes to a definition of a controller, it is a simple JavaScript object that contains attributes and properties of our functions and variables, etc. Each controller accepts a scope as a parameter, as we define like dollar $scope, and with refers the application or the model of the controller needs to be handled. Okay, so let me define this definition. So AngularJS controllers, right? So mainly relies on to control the flow of data in the application. So a controller defines using ng controller directive. So a controller is a JavaScript object that contains attributes, properties, variables, and functions. This is similar to a class where we are going to define properties, variables, and functions. Similar to the class, we have a controller here in AngularJS, which is nothing but an object which contains attributes, properties, variables, and functions. Okay. Each controller accepts $scope as a parameter, which refers to the application or model that the control needs to handle. Okay. For example, after you give the reference of AngularJS, what you have to do is you have to create the Angular model, right? Using Angular model. So Angular is small case, and you assign this to my app. Okay, where my app equal to angular.model of. Here you can define the app name. Okay, and after this, my app dot controller of. I'm going to define here student controller function, which basically default accepts one parameter called $scope. And here I'm going to define scope dot student is a collection. Instead of this, I'm going to define first name, right? Mahesh, right? Last name is some Gupati, right? So, and after this, I'm going to have one more parameter called full name. This is my function instead of it, where student object, this is the object I'm defining it, right? So for this, I'm assigning my student object inside of scope student obj equal to dollar scope dot student. Okay. And now I'll say return student obj dot first name plus student obj dot last name. Okay. And then I'm closing my function. This is my function closing. And then I'm closing my this thing. What is that? This student object close. And this is AngularJS close. So, and this here, the student controller, right, is defined as a JavaScript object with scope argument. Correct. The scope refers to an application which uses the student controller object, this object. The scope.student is a property of student controller object, right? So the first name and the last name are two type of properties of scope student. These two are two properties. We pass the default values to them. The property full name is a function of a scope student object which returns combined the first name and last name. As a note, we can also define the controller object in a separate JS file and refer that file as an HTML page. Okay, let's see in the example like how it is working. Okay, go to my this Visual Studio Coder. I'm just creating HTML and I'll take this as common as usual. Sorry. Copy this AngularJS and then body and then form and here this is AngularJS control demo. This title and the sample application, sample AngularJS application for AngularJS controller. Okay. Now here, so what I'll do is first I'll create script as I told you var. Okay. This is my app equal to angular.module. I'll say this is my app. My app dot controller, right? App student controller function which will default accept scope variable, and instead of this I'm going to define my scope variable, that is student. Okay, and inside of this I'm defining two properties, first name Ramana, last name Belli, and this is one more property which is a function. Okay, here I'm declaring a variable called student obj. Student obj equal to student, sorry, scope of scope dot student. Now I'll return student obj dot first name, okay, plus student obj dot last name. Okay, so this is my JavaScript function full name for the full name, and this is first name and last name. This is the full name. This is the two properties, and this is the function property. Okay, now go back to this thing here. I'm just going to define my div at ng app. In this case, my ng app is my app. Okay, and ng controller. In this case, My controller is student controller. Okay, just come here inside this div. And here I'll just say enter first name, input, text. Okay, and here I'm combining this to name, close it. Okay, and this is a break tag I'm giving. Enter last name, enter last name, input type equal to text, and bind this to this is first name and this is last name. Again, I'll keep break tag, and after this I want to ask AMP ID, student ID. So I'm trying here something student ID, right? Student ID. This I'm printing from student dot. I want to define this student, and after this I want to define ID 3387 student dot ID. So let's go back to this and see how it is working. Did it and the model first last name, that's fine. But this I'm reading it, but instead of that, if you just print it, because we're talking about a controller, I'll just say student dot first name, and this here last name, and let's say student first name, student last name, student ID. This would be first here. Okay, let me, and let's say student full name. Let me see student dot full name. Okay, let me see this how it is working. See here, ID is printed from here, and name, first name, last name. Oops, the full name is wrong here. What's a mistake? Full name I defined where student object equal to scope student and return student first name and student. Okay, let's check last name. Let me try this. No. Student full name. Okay, that's the function, right? We should call with parentheses. We try this. Yeah, now you can see. So just give some space and go back here and see. Here it is. Student ID, first name, last name, and the full name. This is how it is working via controller. So what I did was I just created a controller, student controller. Inside of that, I just defined an object called student. Inside of object, I defined three properties and another property as a function, which will combine first name and last name. So as I said, to use this controller or any values of AngularJS controller variables, we have to use regular AngularJS expressions. The syntax is double curly braces. This is the student ID, student first name, last name, and full name. Okay, so if you want to read through, we have to use NZ model, and that is going to bind it to a variable or HTML control. Okay, but here I'm directly access it from this particular student object. This is the object which contains this. So similar way, I think you define multiple students and repeat through using NZ repeat if you want. Okay, there's a simple example demonstration like how to create a student controller using controller. Now to read the controller variable values using AngularJS expressions. Okay, I hope you understood the AngularJS, the controller, how to define it, and how they are rendering on UI. Okay, so this is basically using it for flow the data from different controls. So it's JavaScript object that contains attributes and properties along with the functions. Each controller accepts $scope as a default parameter, which refers to the application that the controller needs to be handled. Okay, so thanks for listening to this video and please subscribe this channel for more videos. Thank you.